AM 1460 WXBR, the talk of Metro South, 7:51 here on this Thursday morning. You're listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. Peter Czymbor and Mike Paiva here with you on this Thursday morning. Mike, something has been missing the past 5 weeks of our program.
What would that be?
We have not had Mayor Bill Carpenter on the program in the past 5 weeks, but that is changing right now as we welcome into the studio Mr. Mayor Bill Carpenter. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I was running a few minutes behind schedule this morning. Things get a little crazy sometimes, but it's great to be on. And I feel kind of privileged that you guys even keep track of my appearances here on the show.
Well, it was on our one-year anniversary show, so it's kind of easy with that being said. Every time you come
you spoiled it for me now.
I know. Every time you come on the program, whether it's frequent or infrequent, it's been frequent, never any shortage of things to discuss and never any shortage of things happening at City Hall in and around the city of Brockton. Let's talk about the press conference which you held in conjunction with Chief Hayden and Plymouth County District Attorney Tim Cruz earlier this week. That was about two things, really. We'll talk about them both, surveillance cameras and graffiti. Let's talk about surveillance cameras.
Well, it was about several things. I mean, I think really, I think
public safety, which led to the surveillance
exactly.
cameras.
I think that the chief and I felt after a few days, I mean, unfortunately, this city had 3 homicides in the space of 8 days. And no one is more upset about it than the chief and I. And we've been working hard already and working even harder now to secure the safety and the peace on the streets of the city for the good people who live here. And but we thought that, people were asking for a response. I think it's important to communicate with the public. And, we did a lot of strategizing with both Brockton detectives, state police detectives, some of the other agencies as to what could the city do even more proactively, particularly with the warm weather months coming, to reduce the violence in the city. And so I think we talked about a number of issues in there. I think the number one issue, and I appreciate the support of the City Council, is I asked the City Council to allow me to transfer some money from another account into police overtime so we can get some more patrols on the streets. It's great to say, well, let's hire a few more cops, and I think that is the long-term plan. But you have to wait for an academy. It takes 6 months to get academy trained, and so, I mean, that's a process. That's a 9 to 12-month process. In the meantime, I'm worried about today, this week, next month. And so I do appreciate the support of the council in approving my first request, and there's a second request coming to get some money over to the chief so that he has the ability to get more patrols out on the street. With that commitment that we're making to more patrols, we've also received a commitment from the Massachusetts State Police to bring additional patrols into the city in conjunction with the action that we're taking. So when you combine the two, I think that people will see in May and June a noticeable increase in the police presence, which I think people have noticed already because we've very proactively keeping as many officers and patrol units out on the street as possible. And we're also doing some other things with the gang unit and intelligence, the narcotics unit. You haven't even seen this one yet, but I'll give you a little news story from Mr. Paiva. We had another major drug bust last evening. We took down a heroin dealer on Center Street with over half a kilo of heroin. Great entry by our special response team. It was about a 1-month investigation by our beefed up narcotics unit. That was 3 yesterday. 3 drug dealers taken off the street between yesterday morning and last night. And the one last night was a major heroin dealer here in the city that's locked up this morning, and a lot of drugs and money taken off the streets. So, we're proactively working at this every day. I think my plans were laid out during the campaign, and we continue to tweak them and enhance them. But to comment on a couple of things you specifically asked me about, sure. I've learned quickly from the chief and from the other law enforcement agencies that there is a huge value to video surveillance cameras in reducing crime, both from a homeland security standpoint, but also from a deterring crime and preventing crime and solving crimes. If you're in Boston, there's nowhere in the center part of the city of Boston, there's not 1 square inch that's not on a camera somewhere. I mean, think back, how did they solve the marathon bombing? it was from video cameras on the fronts of businesses out on that sidewalk of that section of Beacon Street. And I think it's something we need to make a huge proactive effort on here in the city of Brockton. So on a couple fronts, as part of our Brockton Fights Back campaign to reduce crime here in the city, Chief Hayden and I, over the next 60 days, will be approaching primarily business owners and commercial property owners, but all property owners will be approaching property owners and asking them to install 1 or 2 cameras on the outside of their buildings pointed at public areas. So, we're thinking primarily along busy main streets, intersections, places where crimes may occur, but really all of the busy streets in the city, that we get these areas under video surveillance, and so that as that becomes known, we think it'll drive crime away from those areas. People will be reluctant to sell drugs, have prostitution, whatever these different street-level crimes may be, if they know they're on camera. And then beyond that, when a crime does occur, the availability of the video is critical in solving crimes. So just to give you a quick example, I've already spoken to a couple of commercial property owners right here in the downtown on Montello Street, who both immediately agreed to install 2 cameras in one case, 3 in the other, on the outside of their buildings. They're ordering the cameras already. Well, just those 2 business owners, property owners, agreeing to put those 5 cameras in gives us complete coverage of 2 blocks of the downtown along Montello Street, along with views up a couple of the side streets. So, what does that now give us in terms of letting people know that that area is under video surveillance? And if and when a crime does occur in that area, the police will immediately have a place to go, and they can say, hey, give us your video between 11 p.m. and midnight last night, and it'll be a huge tool in solving crime. In that program, we believe we can get a couple hundred cameras installed across the city in critical locations at no cost to the taxpayers. We're asking private property owners to put these cameras in, add them to their systems, or get systems to help us, because the police cannot do everything by themselves. If we're going to restore peace to the city and change the perception of the city, it's going to require everyone in the community, including the business community, private property owners, families, churches. We need everyone involved, and we think this is a very concrete, tangible thing that in a relatively short period of time will dramatically improve safety in the city by getting private property owners to install video cameras shining down in public areas, sidewalks, streets, intersections.
I want to get in as much as we can, because I know we have
go ahead.
limited time with you. This morning you mentioned that you're asking local business owners to install these
cameras.
cameras.
And also the bar owners, if you want me to mention that.
Are you making it mandatory for those who serve alcohol? I was under that impression.
We're tweaking the language on the proposed regulation. I don't have the power to do that unilaterally. I'm going to present it to the License Commission and ask the License Commission to create this requirement on bars and taverns that are serving alcohol to have video surveillance systems both inside and outside. Some do already. That's why I don't think it's an unreasonable requirement, because there are many establishments that have already put these systems in. But we want to have some specific requirements around covering both the inside of the establishment and the outside perimeter of the establishment, requirements to keep the equipment operational 24/7, and also to guarantee access to police and other state and federal law enforcement agencies upon request to see the video. And I'm not blaming the bar owners for all the crime. That's not what we're doing here. But we do know that some of this activity does take place in connection with people going in and out of bars. And again, as a crime-fighting tool, this can be very effective. That murder on the Lid is on videotape. The police have a videotape of that murder taking place. That's a critical piece of evidence in solving that crime. The shooting that took place on Grove Street, the individuals had left a bar about 20 minutes earlier. Being able to identify those people from their presence in a club half an hour earlier is a critical piece of the investigation. So when you look at what it can provide, now what we're tweaking and what we'll work with the License Commission on is exactly which bars. I don't think every little place that sells a glass of wine or a beer necessarily has to have the requirement, but generally speaking, I believe that we're going to ask the License Commission to create this requirement for bars who serve alcohol after midnight. I think that takes the onus off a lot of the small establishments, and we're going to recommend an exclusion for the private clubs, because I don't think the private clubs are part of the problem here. First of all, I think the private clubs pretty much all have video systems regardless, but beyond that, the private clubs, everyone knows who's coming and going in out of the private clubs, and they're not part of the problem with some of the things we're talking about.
Now, the surveillance and equipment, can you hear me, Bill? The surveillance and equipment coming out of the business owner's pocket?
Yep.
Okay.
Part of the cost of doing business. And I think that I look at the fact that many of the establishments already have them, and so that leads me to believe that it's not an unreasonable expense for a bar owner. And I think it will help limit the bar owner's liability themselves when something occurs. We need everyone's cooperation, but I think if establishments are going to be open late at night serving alcohol, I think it's a reasonable security environment. I think it makes it safer. I think that someone who has a warrant outstanding may be more reluctant to come through a video surveillance entry point at the establishment if they've got a warrant outstanding.
You mentioned some business owners which volunteered installing surveillance cameras at their establishments. Any resistance from anyone who really doesn't want the additional expense for themselves?
We've just started asking business owners over the last few days. Personally, I haven't had anyone say no yet, which is really encouraging. And some of this could be a 6-family house that sits on a corner. Really anyone that lives along a fairly busy street or near an intersection or near a densely populated area. We're asking folks if they're willing to put a camera on, shining out into public ways, sidewalks and streets. We're not looking to violate anyone's privacy. We're not asking anyone to shine a camera in someone's backyard or something. We're talking strictly about folks that own property near intersections and business districts along main streets. Those are the key locations where if we can have cameras blanketing across the city will be a safer place.
I have some friends who have businesses who have surveillance systems on their establishments. How much do they cost, you know?
I don't know exactly, but I know typically if they've already got a system, I think it's like a couple $100 for them to add a camera for us shining out. And I've approached half a dozen business owners that I've just run into, in the course of the last couple days. And every single one has said yes. So I said, do you think you throw a camera too on the outside? And matter of fact, I would say some of them are almost enthusiastic because you know what? It's going to create a safer environment around that piece of property. And particularly if you get several property owners to cooperate, that's going to create a safer environment as it becomes known that these areas are under surveillance. And if you commit a crime there, the police will have a videotape of you committing the crime.
At what point do you want it to be mandatory for businesses that serve alcohol after 12 a.m. to have these installed?
Right. We're going to send a proposal to the License Commission. We'll ask the License Commission to hear it at their next meeting, which will be, I think it's the third Thursday of the month. So, this will, we'll be working in a partnership with the License Commission, and I'm hopeful that they will see the benefit in this and adopt this requirement. I know that we have to give proper notice to the bar owners and give them a chance to come in. We have to hold a public hearing. We have to give proper legal notice to the bar owners to give them an opportunity to come in and be heard at the public hearing. We will listen to them. I'm sure the License Commission will consider changes to the proposal we're sending if the bar owners advocate for some changes in the provisions. But I think we've got to do everything we possibly can to make the city safe. And then you also asked me about graffiti.
Correct.
And I want to thank Councilor Ian Erie, who is the chairman of the Ordinance Committee, based upon a conversation I had with the councilor the other day on Monday. He has scheduled a meeting of the City Council Ordinance Committee for Monday, May 5th at 6 p.m., and I think they're going to hear, 3 different proposed ordinance changes, but one is an ordinance change that Councilor DiNapoli filed at my request to add, basically just add one sentence to the city's existing public nuisance ordinance that would add a failure to remove graffiti within 72 hours as a violation of the city's nuisance ordinance. I'm just horrified as I'm driving around the city lately at the amount of graffiti everywhere. It ruins the image of the city. It reduces the value of property. It damages neighborhood. And a good percentage of that, I'm not saying all graffiti is gang-related, but some of that graffiti is gang-related. It's gang tagging. And there's just no place for it in this city. And if we're going to change the direction this city is going in, and we're going to change the perception of this city, we cannot have graffiti, and I want it removed. So we will launch a program to help cover some of the costs so that property owners are not overburdened. I've allocated $20,000 from the federal community development block grant money that we received this year into an account that can be used towards graffiti removal. And we're fine-tuning a plan where we'll help property owners with the cost of removing the graffiti if they ask us to, because I understand, the property owner is the victim in the crime. They didn't put the graffiti on there. They're the victim. However, I need property owners to be responsible and remove the graffiti after it occurs within a reasonable length of time. So I think it's very important that I think most property owners will be responsible, will want to remove the graffiti if we send them a letter and ask them to. And particularly if we offer a program that helps cover the cost of removing the graffiti.
How would that program work?
How the program would work is we have an existing graffiti hotline now that utilizes the Workforce Express people to remove the graffiti. The way the program would work is we'd ask for a $100 administrative fee, and then we'd send the Workforce Express people out to remove the graffiti. But we can only do that with the authorization of the private property owner. We can't go on private property without the private property owner's permission. So I think that a $100 administrative fee was not a lot to ask for them to come out, and they'll remove the graffiti regardless of whatever the cost is to remove the graffiti. And if it's something small that the property owner can remove themselves for less than $100, then we can keep those small nuisance ones out of the program. But I've looked at what's worked in other cities, and the only approach that works with graffiti is removing it as fast as they put it up. And if they put it up 7 times, you remove it 8. We cannot tolerate the graffiti in the city, and the second you start to look the other way and allow it even just a little bit, then it begins to overtake your city. And I am just completely fed up as I drive around the city right now, seeing the amount of graffiti that's around this city.
Bill, what about graffiti that pops up in abandoned areas or places that don't have any property owners?
Right.
Is that something the city would take care of?
There's not a ton of that, but, I've already spoken to the park superintendent, to the building superintendent. I've spoken with the deputy superintendent of facilities in the school department. And in terms of public property, I'm establishing a zero tolerance. If there's tagging graffiti on public property, I want it removed. And if we have to incur some expense to remove it, so be it. I don't think people going to a playground, going to the park, going up to DW should see graffiti. We shouldn't see graffiti on school buildings or public buildings. A lot of vacant property, Mike, does still have an owner that's responsible for it, and we do have a vacant and abandoned property ordinance in the city, so we can send them a notice, and this is another reason for adding this specific graffiti language to the nuisance ordinance, because under the vacant and abandoned property ordinance that the city already has, once we have that language in there, we could send the property owner a notice that they're in violation of the city ordinance, give them 5 days to address it, and then if they don't, our vacant and abandoned property ordinance would allow us to go out, cure the violation, which in this case would be remove the graffiti, and place a lien on the property for our costs and expenses in doing that. So eventually, someday, that property gets sold to somebody else, and when it does, that lien has to be paid off and the taxpayers get their money back.
It's got a pothole hotline, a graffiti hotline. Give this man an 800 number.
Yeah.
He's selling us crap.
Well, maybe we'll have to make it a 900 number. The city could use the money.
900 number. Yeah, those are big in the 90s.
$3.99 a minute.
$3.99 a minute. We're chatting with Mayor Bill Carpenter here on WXBR, the talk of Metro South. You made some headlines a few weeks ago. You even got yourself on Fox 25 in relation to your views on teacher drug testing in the city of Brockton. What led you to want this, and do you think it's even something that will ever come to fruition? Because it seems like there's some opposition to this from the superintendent, from the teachers union. Doesn't seem like they want it.
Correct. I had a couple of, the superintendent and I have a great relationship. I just have so much respect and admiration for Superintendent Kathleen Smith. I've known her for a long time. I think she's a great superintendent. So what's great about our relationship is we don't have any trouble telling each other what we think. So she's made it pretty clear to me that she disagrees with my position on this. And that's fine. But I think we have agreed to have an ongoing dialogue. How it came up really was it was a kind of a throwaway line at the end of an interview about the situation at the Arnone School back about 3 weeks ago when it was determined that an employee in the school had used drugs in the faculty bathroom and left behind a piece of paper with drugs on it. And so doing an interview about that incident, at the end of a 20-minute interview, somehow the question gets asked, well, what do you think about, drug testing for school employees? And I wasn't targeting just teachers. Just to be clear, I support it for all school employees, not limited to teachers, all school employees. And I said, yeah, I believe in random drug, period. I believe it in the workplace. In the private sector, drug testing is very common in the private sector now. There are a lot of employers, you can't even get an interview for a job until after you've passed a drug test. And there are many, many companies that you work for that you are subject to a random drug test. So I don't think it's anything that radical. And what I've said is that, the city of Brockton has about 3,000 employees. Over 2,000 of them work in the school department. There's no employer today with 3,000 employees that does not have some people that are dealing with substance abuse, drug problems. And so I think if you've got employees working around children and we're supposed to have drug-free schools, shouldn't drug-free schools also apply to the people who work there? I think it should. But I'm not looking to do it necessarily in a punitive manner. And here's where there is a little common ground with the superintendent and I. I would like to see the drug testing as part of an overall employee assistance plan, which is also very common in the private sector now, where you have a third party on a confidential basis that offers a variety of support services to employees in a company. So, any type of drug testing would have to be collectively bargained, Pete. You're right. So do I think it happens tomorrow? No. Do I expect the unions to resist it? Yes. Do I think it even has support from the superintendent? No. However, I'm going to say what I think. The mayor does sit as the chair of the school committee. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for me to express an opinion on a matter like this with the schools. I think it's a part of a larger viewpoint of protecting we've got 17,500 students going to school every day here in the city. I think we're responsible for their safety from the minute they walk out the door of their house in the morning until the time they walk back in that door at the end of the day. And I think this is one part of it. I think making sure that schools are drug-free is part of protecting the students' safety. So if some folks want to disagree with me on that, that's okay. But the fact of the matter is that within the past couple months, we've had a lunch lady arrested twice, and a school teacher's aide dismissed, fired for drug violations. So I think for us to stick our head in the sand and make believe that it's not an issue, I think it is an issue. But I'm looking to work cooperatively with the unions to try to work out an employee assistance plan that would be built around helping the employees. I think some type of 2 or 3 strike policy is appropriate. I think the first time the person has an issue on a drug test, I think you remove them from the workplace temporarily, but I think you offer assistance and get them treatment and keep it confidential and give them a chance to get back on track and get back. But if it happens again, then I think we need to address it in a more public, permanent manner.
Well, those comments got them on both Fox 25 and the Hip Hop Show at the station.
And the Hip Hop Show. And WBZ, I'm not supposed to say call it on the air, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
A major Boston AM station.
A major Boston AM station that might be a 50,000 watt flamethrower.
Exactly.
Last question before I let you go. It was discussed earlier this week that there potentially could be a question on an upcoming ballot in relation to the power plant that may or may not come to fruition. It may or may not have any weight with anything. What's your thoughts on that?
It would be non-binding. My thoughts are I've always supported it. Should have been done 8 or 9 years ago, not now. The reality today...
Did you and Ed Byers just agree on something?
That's it.
Okay.
Not on purpose.
Okay. I just wanted to point that out, but continue.
But Having said that, and here's where I'll disagree with Mr. Byers, is that as the mayor, as the CEO of the city, I now need to contend with all of the outstanding litigation that's going on here that has the city of Brockton at risk for millions of dollars potentially in lawsuit settlements. Well, those lawsuits don't go away just because we take a poll to see how people feel about the electric plants. So I remember back in my talk show days, Pete, 8-9 years ago, saying, why isn't this on the ballot? Why aren't people being given an opportunity to express an opinion on this? So, I've always supported that concept. I just think at this point where we are today with multiple lawsuits going on, with the city spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to outside lawyers defending some of these court actions, I just don't see the practical benefit of the referendum now. I certainly wouldn't be against it. I think the voters should always have an opportunity to express their opinion on any matter that affects city government, but I don't think it changes anything today. I think the issues we need to deal with around, with all of the litigation and the things that have been raised, and I will be addressing those things publicly over the next couple months.
Well, it's 8:17 here on this Thursday morning, Bill. I know you've got an 8:30 meeting down at City Hall.
8:30 meeting, but I am going into Boston today. Mayor Marty Walsh in Boston is hosting a gun summit. He's called a number of mayors together to meet on illegal gun trafficking. We're not talking about taking away the rights of legal gun owners. I always have to clarify that. I had someone approach me about that this morning. But we do have a huge problem in the cities with illegal guns. And I commend Mayor Walsh. With the ATF is coming in to speak to us. The former Suffolk County DA will be presenting to us. So I'm going to be spending the first half of the day participating in that gun summit in Boston. And then later this afternoon, I have the opportunity to testify on a bill in front of the House of Representatives that's been filed by Representative Claire Cronin that would treat drug treatment centers very similar to schools and creating a zone around them that if you sold drugs within 100 yards of any type of drug treatment facility, there would be stiffer penalties for being convicted of that. And I support that because I think folks who are trying to do the right thing, who are in recovery, trying to maintain recovery and seeking services, ought to be able to get in and out of a facility without being offered drugs to purchase in the parking lot. And so I will be testifying in favor of that bill later this afternoon up in the State House.
We'll have to talk to you about that more when you come back on the program, also about your trips to Washington, D.C. and things of that nature. So
D.C., and I'm making a trip to Cape Verde this week, so I'm looking forward to that. I leave
First
tomorrow.
visit to Cape Verde?
First visit to Cape Verde. I think it's really important. I've got such a business schedule set up when I get there. It's going to be.
What are you doing in Cape Verde?
Well, I'm meeting with mayors. I'm meeting with the Prime Minister. I'm meeting with the U.S. Ambassador. We're doing some charitable work, delivering some books to some schools, delivering a laptop computer to a music school, visiting a center for kids with cerebral palsy. But the main focus of it is around business, culture, and government and exchanges. And the reality is today that about 40% of the people who live in the city are from Cape Verde. So I think it's important for me as the mayor to build relationships with government officials over there because there's an opportunity for commerce, there's an opportunity for cultural exchanges, and just an opportunity to draw the communities closer together. So I think it's an important mission. It'll be busy, but I think it'll be worthwhile.
Well, you'll have to let us know how that visit goes when you come back on the program.
I will.
Mayor Bill Carpenter joining us here on AM 1460, the talk of Metro
Can
South.
I make one last quick comment?
Sure.
I do agree with you on the 1 p.m. Sunday kickoff for NFL games. It is I'm a big fan of the 1 p.m. kickoff, which is really great because if you live in California, it's a 10 a.m. kickoff.
It's brutal.
The doubleheaders in California, 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. I do love the primetime games. I love watching 8 o'clock football on a Sunday night. But there's nothing better than a 1 o'clock kickoff on a Sunday afternoon for a Pats game.
I agree with you on that. Mayor Bill Carpenter joining us here on AM 1460, the new WXBR.